It's hard to accept for the average modern mind. Hell, it took me the better part of my youth to accept it, to accept many of the things I go into today with some ease. But changing your mind, changing your mind, sorry, repeatedly is not necessarily an indication of progress or of openness or of intellectual integrity. What it indicates is a weak mind governed by an impressionable, childish demeanor and a poor judgment, a naivete, perhaps immaturity. That the idea that the change is good for its own sake is a modern lie, another one of those modern myths I may have to make another video about, based on this worshipping of femininity and chaos. Guess which sex is characterized by a wishy-washy mind, one day thinking this and the next day thinking that, one day loving you and the next day telling you that the chemistry is not there and that she doesn't feel the same way about you. One day believing this and the next day believing that. Here's a little thing about genius, as I understand it. Genius is the ability to perceive patterns in the fluidity of time, which hold true over longer periods than the average man can perceive. A genius makes conclusions which withstand the test of time. They are more timeless, in other words, more temporally resistant. And what is temporally resistant? That's right, order, a higher form of order. In fact, quality can be measured or can be understood as that which resists time. A mind which has incorporated perceptions beyond the commonplace and not merely restricted itself to a shallow event horizon, in other words, one which draws inspiration from beyond its particular time and place and can find patterns that are applicable beyond it, is called a genius. What defines a genius? Well, let me try to attempt it without proposing that I am a genius myself. A genius has a longer perceptual event horizon, has a good memory, and can incorporate experiences into abstractions many years after they are experienced. In short, a genius has a broader sampling base. That's what it means to have a longer perceptual event horizon. It's to draw inspiration from a broader spectrum of experiences, not being restricted, walled in by institutions, by the here and the now. This is how memory factors in. A mind sees something today. 10 years later, it sees something else, which clicks in some way with what it saw before. You need a good memory for this to happen. Otherwise, you can't do this. You can't find the pattern between an experience today and an experience 10 years ago, unless you have a good memory. This establishes a connection. It establishes the beginning of a pattern recognition, if there's one present. Memory is an indispensable part of creating genius. This is why the slandering of the past, of nature, and this is why this idea of living in the moment, of being unhindered by any baggage being a catchphrase for experiences that inform us, experiences from the past that inform us. This is why these are indispensable to the emergence of genius. And this is why these are slandered, like I said before, and ridiculed. This is why forgetfulness is proposed and promoted. This is why, like I said before, living in the moment is considered the highest value of remaining happy. Of course you remain happy because ignorance is bliss. And the more ignorant you are, the more blissful you are, like an animal. It forgets itself from one moment to the other, and so it cannot retain the information which would make it more careful, more inhibited, more contained by care. So all this is a form of dumbing down, a socially promoted retardation. Why? Well, because stupidity is more malleable, more controllable, less resistant to domination. Intelligence is not. Intelligence is not impressionable, cannot be directed so easily, cannot be exploited as easily or as efficiently. It's a good thing to be open to the possibility of your own error, but when you find that you change your mind day by day or hour by hour on the very same subject, then the issue is not your humility or your openness, but I think the issue is your stupidity, your simple-mindedness, your feeble-mindedness. How many times can you change your mind before you consider the possibility that perhaps the problem is your mind? I mean, it's true that reality is fluid and we must always remain open to new information and adapt to new information. But change does not occur at a rate where nothing is consistent. And besides that, like I said before, genius is finding a pattern, to finding a perception which holds true beyond the immediate. It's because it's not superficial in its judgments. It does not draw information from the superficial, from the ephemeral, from authority figures that just give it to it, and it just accepts without considering the subject itself. Another factor to consider, given the present information age, where knowledge, i.e. experiences, are stored and disseminated, but also interpreted for the simple-minded, not only can the sampling base be controlled and manufactured, but many regurgitate information, repeat information, repeat experiences that are handed down to them in the form of knowledge, which is no more than second-hand experiences. Knowledge they do not fully comprehend themselves because they are not the ones that have experienced them, and because this information is not truly their own. They are usually characterized by this insistent deference and referencing, where it is used to pretend intelligence when it is no more than stupidity parroting knowledge, repeating the common myth using the usual statistical data. The internet is a perfect example of this source of knowledge. With universal access to it, minds can now pretend to understand by simply knowing, by simply name dropping. They can repeat dates and data, reference famous figures, and defer to them, stepping behind them into their shadow, from where they can then cast aspersions and gain a female's victory of belonging to the biggest and strongest top dog. Jean Baudrillard claimed that statistics were a kind of wish fulfillment because the data can be directed not only by how you ask a question, but that you actually ask it at all. Furthermore, data on its own says nothing in and of itself. What comes after in deciphering and explaining data is where the mind control comes in. Males are indeed the expendable sex, but not because of some great feminine conspiracy. Females are incapable of such things. Females are what they've always been: instinctual, simple, easily manipulated and seduced, natural agencies which can be controlled and directed with ease. The feminine mystique is another modern contrivance. It uses the disparity between mimetic and genetic dispositions, this confused jumble of saying one thing in accordance to popular beliefs while acting in another way, in accordance with instinctual drives, as proof of some mysterious essence, something magical, something romantic. It feeds into the desperation of men children wanting to find the reason why females are so resistant to their talents, or are so mysterious and beyond their comprehension, and are so resistant to their domination, and how they can see through their bullshit. If in this age females have been seduced and controlled by a masculine power which promotes nihilism as a means of eradicating all male competitors, this too is a part of evolution. It is the evolution of male competitiveness. It is a male on male struggle. Technologies have always been produced to deal with challenging tribes of males, males who vie for resources, one of which have always been females. Men invent methods to defend what they control and to increase the realm of what they control. The level of technological sophistication has been attained where violence is no longer necessary. Castration can occur mentally, where a population of males is made docile, is kept infantile, impressionable, in short, where it has been emasculated, feminized. Its females are now the property of the system, which promotes the ideals of mental castration, denying these males a destiny. Controlling females is controlling the future of a particular tribe. And in general, it's controlling the future of mankind. This is why running to the very system that benefits from feminization to defend your rights, which were provided for you by paternalism itself, is another level of stupidity. It's another level of dullness of mind and spirit. It's another level of feminization. Imagine damning paternalism and then crying because of the repercussions of your damnation. You see, in the past, males were allowed to have their own female or females so as to integrate them into the system, a system controlled by elites, which needed hands to toil and to bear arms. The escalation of masculine conflict produced technologies, techniques, which eventually made masculine advantages obsolete, or at least it did so internally within the system. This technology is called farming. It's called husbandry. You can call it psychology. Monogamy is another technique. It is another technology. But when dullards think of technology, they usually think of gadgets and machines, like the good nerds that they are. In this case, a particular elite, one distinctly ignoble and nihilistic, is using intellectual methods and sociological methods and psychological methods to maintain its power. It does so by turning the masculine traits that challenge it, once considered male virtues, into cultural vices, by controlling the majority of females and by manipulating the natural tendencies of beta males, who see in this an opportunity to usurp natural hierarchies and to rise to the top of the procreative totem pole. It produces effete, degenerate idiots, stunted men, both in mind and body. It then produces stunted, substandard offspring, the next generation of slaves, the next generation of sheeple. This ensures that those on top will have nothing to fear from men, real men, for generations to come. It was paternalism which gave most males the opportunity to pass on their genes. And it was paternalism that protected many females from being cast aside as unfit, or protected them from being used and abused by degenerate males. Its success essentially laid down the groundwork for its own demise. Consider this: strength eventually overpowers all challengers. It eliminates the very opposition that keeps it in shape. that keeps it alert, that keeps it aware and strong. Then, having no more challenges or worthy challengers, it grows softer and softer, having no opposition to improve itself with and to test itself against. It wanes, and then disease sets in. Laziness, complacency, lethargy. It atrophies. The strong declines until it is overpowered. This is part of the natural cycle of life. Women have not been liberated from masculine control. What they've been liberated from is a particular kind of masculinity, and from the middlemen of this particular kind of masculinity relied upon. The subordinate male belonging to a homogeneous unity is no longer necessary. Technologies take over, and heterogeneity makes him this primal man, this more natural man, this kind of man which I will not define for obvious reasons, makes him detrimental to the system's harmony, to its stability. All must be feminized or kept in a state of immaturity. Same difference. Just look at the MRA movement and what it proposes. This sulking, this turning away, this immature hedonism, this boyish, childish activity, behavior. The current modern masculine entity is characterized by anti-natural dispositions, ignoble attitudes. It is conniving, hypocritical, inverting reality until up becomes down and down is considered up. Everything is inverted. Being weak is to be strong. Remaining obtuse is to be cool, to have EQ rather than IQ. Individualism is now uniformity, a surrender to a higher form of self, as it is called. In effect, individuality becomes herd behavior. How ironic, with only symbolic gestures permitted to maintain the illusion that free thinking is happening. We think we are free thinkers when we choose Coke over Pepsi, or when we like rock and roll and not jazz. It is a beta masculinity which has overpowered a stronger opponent because the latter grew soft on the products of its own success, and more magnanimous and more forgiving and less aware. The beta masculinity is clever. It still refrains from assaulting this superior masculinity directly. It gets to him through its soft underbelly, infecting his women, his children, the parts of his unity which are weak and easily seduced by an idea which offers them a relief from reality. It manipulates using human nature and psychology, and then claims that there is no such thing as human nature, and that psychology is debunked. In nature, the mixture of genetic material increases the probability for survival. The theory states that the continuous fluidity of space-time, changing everything, including environmental conditions, and being characterized by its unpredictability, makes change an adaptive attempt to bridge the discrepancy between genetic change and environmental change. Given that life, genes, are a form of ordering and disordering. Nature shows its blind indifference to any single characteristic or trait, and is only a process which increases the possibility, establishes a probability, in other words, because that's what ordering is. Increases the possibility, I say, that life, the pattern of self-replicating, animated, willful interactivity, will persist. It does not care about how tall you are, or how big your muscles are, or how smart you are. As I said, no single trait is preferred over another. What this means is that intelligence is not something nature is geared to reproduce. In many ways, intelligence, heightened awareness, in other words, might even be considered detrimental to survival, as it creates a self-doubt, a questioning uh, as to the purpose or relevance of existing or of acting at all, something simple-mindedness never does. If we think about it, then intelligence is no more than an adaptation meant to deal with more austere, severe environmental conditions. Then it becomes detrimental to survival when it succeeds and is faced with ennui and the endless introspection and search for meaning and purpose this results in. But let us advance the thought. In natural environments, genetic combinations variety simply increases the probability for life and for a particular type of life to continue. But because intelligence is not its aim, this continuous mixing inevitably results in a decline of intelligence. For a person who considers awareness as the quintessential human trait, one which separates it from other species, this decline in intelligence would be considered a regression, a de-evolution. From a purely objective standpoint, this is not so, because there is no teleological motive in nature or in its processes of naturally selecting the most viable organization of self-replicating cells. But from the vantage point of a particular ideal, one which considers intelligence as the highest of all organic characteristics, the highest aim, a defining one at that, this degradation will be considered an anathema. Now, any race mixing one between a population exhibiting a higher potential for intelligence and one exhibiting a lower potential for intelligence will become an unwanted decrease in overall potential. From the perspective of one who belongs to a group which has produced masterpieces, which has dominated most other species and other races, and has ventured towards the stars, this mixing will be considered a negative. Intelligence can be thought of as a mutation, an adaptation that has proven to be so overwhelming in comparison to all other survival mutations that it now becomes self-destructive and results in its own decline.